In Ecuador, the electoral silence comes into force ahead of Sunday's April 13 presidential runoff. In the Dominican Republic, officials are working to identify victims of the nightclub roof collapse that kills at least 220 people. And Russian President Vladimir Putin met with his U.S. Special Envoy Stephen Witkoff on Friday as they sat down for talks in St. Petersburg. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll begin with the news. Stay with us. In Ecuador, the electoral silence began this Friday ahead of Sunday's April 13 presidential runoff. Over 13 million citizens are called to the polls to choose the executive for the next 4 years. The National Electoral Council reported that political organizations and citizens must observe the electoral silence that will be maintained until 5 p.m. local time on Sunday, April the 13th. Local authorities also ratified the beginning of the dry law as from noon Friday. Let us remember that this electoral process takes place amidst an economic crisis and high levels of insecurity, which, according to different analysts, will be the decisive factors in the result of the presidential runoff election. On Friday, assisted voting moves forward in Ecuador for people with disabilities within the process of the presidential runoff. The Ecuadorian National Electoral Council deployed 174 voting stations and 110 roads in the country. The operation has the logistical and security support of the National Police, the Army, and the traffic agents. Ecuadorian presidential candidate Luisa González denounced her opponent Daniel Noboa had ousted her security personnel, the Ministry of Defense, and the Chief of Command.
Hoy he sido informada por el personal de Fuerzas Armadas encargado de mi seguridad.
I was informed by the Armed Forces personnel in charge of my security that they have been abruptly relieved of their duties. This team was created precisely to protect my life, grounded in the serious allegations of an attempt on my life, which are currently under investigation by the prosecutor's office. Therefore, I demand that the team assigned to my security be kept until the election's results are proclaimed. I insist that changing my team at this time poses a risk not only to my life but also to my family. I denounce steadily this irresponsible, reckless and deeply dangerous decision that has been deliberately made by order of Daniel Noboa, the Minister of Defense Jean Carlos, and the Chief of the Joint Command of the Armed Forces General, Jaime Vela, who is accountable for any act that threatens my security, my life and my family.
Likewise, the presidential candidate Luisa González thanks the armed forces for the protection during the electoral campaign.
Mi profundo agradecimiento a las Fuerzas Armadas.
My deep gratitude to the armed forces for the protection they provided during these intense months of national tour, and my gratitude to you, gentlemen of the Joint Command. I make an urgent and public appeal. Do not allow the political power use you as an instrument of terror. I ratify my request to maintain the security team assigned during these decisive days for the country. We are not talking about a favor but about a historical responsibility. I'll govern from unity, justice, peace, and hope. Fear is yours, Mr. Noboa. Hope is ours.
And in the context of the presidential runoff in Ecuador on Sunday the 13th, we go live with Jorge Gestosos to bring us what we can expect in Ecuador's presidential runoff. Hello, Jorge, do you hear me?
Yes, we are here following very, very closely the events of the day. Most definitely, we are about 48 hours away from the runoff, and the atmosphere is completely different this time compared to the first round, where Luisa González has much more chances to become the new president of Ecuador, because during the different 2 months between the first and the second round that took place, she got the approval, the support, the endorsement of the movement, indigenous movement of Pachacutic, that accounts for about 5% of the votes in the first one. We're talking about that 44% was an even result for the two main candidates, Luisa González and Daniel Noboa at 44%, and the third candidate was from Pachacutic, Leonidas Issa, with 5%. So if you add up 44% from Luisa and 5% of the indigenous people, were close to the 5%, but on top of that, she got another endorsements, and that most definitely are putting her in a very favorite situation. On the other hand, in terms of unusual thing was that part of their security team from Luisa González has been removed from orders of the President Daniel Noboa. We're talking about a situation where a country with the highest rating of assassination and violence, mostly in the region. We're talking about so far over 2,000 assassinations in the first 3 months, about 27 assassinations a day, and that percentage is about as twice as it was in the same period of 2024. So to remove their security guards to the candidate for the presidency that the polls put her as a favorite candidate, it's a very significant decision from the part of the president candidate Daniel Noboa. We are thinking, according to what the National Council of Electoral says, that the results, polls here close at 5 p.m., and they expect that by around 9 p.m. they could announce a tendency that could be almost irreversible. So if everything goes as expected, before midnight on Sunday, we will have our results, and in that case, will be very, very close the way we are following this election, because definitely there's a big question marks in many areas, but the most important thing is that the denunciation of the analysts is that this election, as the previous elections here in Ecuador in the last 8 years, was not taking place with a level field. It is an inclined field in favor of the president candidate Daniel Noboa, that is not respecting the institutions, that is using the government on his favor, that is using also the social networks also with a limited amount of money. We are talking that this is the son of the richest person in the country, of the banana conglomerate, the group Noboa, that also opens and opens the big question mark that has been denounced. There is the largest export of banana of the country, leaving from a port that is allegedly controlled by that group, and in those bananas are being found in Europe containers with cocaine. So the big question mark is until which point the group of Noboa that is related to the candidate is related to that drug trafficking. So we're following all that, and we will be sharing it with you throughout the day. We'll get back to you now.
Thank you, Jorge, for your remark, and we'll be with you on our next news brief for more information. Thank you. And now let's take a very short break, but don't go away because we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In the Dominican Republic, officials are working to identify victims of the nightclub roof collapse that killed at least 220 people as the crew completed day-long search and survivors earlier on Thursday. It is regarded was informed that the bodies have been removed from the site and the debris has been cleared while family members of victims remain at the forensic pathology offices waiting for information on their missing relatives. In this context, relatives of the victims accuse authorities of delay in releasing the bodies after they have been waiting for more than 72 hours in a tent set up at the main entrance of the coroner's office for the remains of their loved ones to be delivered. The families are demanding authorities to better organize and speed up the release process, which has been affected by the alleged confusions with the remains of some of the victims. In Venezuela, a flight arrived this Friday from the U.S. with 191 repatriated migrants returned into the country through the Back to the Homeland plan. The flight arrived at Simón Bolívar International Airport in Maiquetía with 16 women and 175 men. Out of the 191, two are citizens with international arrest warrants from Interpol. In the year 2025, 13 flights with Venezuelan nationals have arrived in the country, of which 10 were Venezuelan airline Conviasa airplanes and 3 were U.S.-based airplanes. In Brazil, federal police repressed a march of the Freeland Camp indigenous movement, which demanded the demarcation of their territories. Indigenous activists gathered in front of the National Congress in rejection of the decision of the legislators to deny the demarcation of the lands. The demonstrators were attacked by police officers who tried to disperse the protests with tear gas bombs, while they prevent access to the emergency teams to attend and transport the wounded. Meanwhile, thousands of migrants leave New York shelters for fear of mass deportations by the U.S. government. Migration authorities in New York also denounced the closure of hotels and other facilities. In the U.S. Supreme Court of Justice issued an order stating that the government must return to the incarcerated deported and allow his immigration case to run its course. The top court requests return to the countries of Salvadorian citizen Gilmar Obrego Garcia, who was supposedly wrongly sent to maximum security prison in El Salvador. The situation of Obrego Garcia, who would immigrated to the U.S. due to the constant threat he and his families received from the criminal gang Barrio 18, required the intervention of the justice system. China raises tariff on U.S. goods from 84% to 125% in response to the tariff war unleashed by Donald Trump's administration. Additional tariffs on goods imports from the U.S. will be these of April the 12th. These last 41 points increase is another Beijing response to the so-called reciprocal tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump. On Friday, Chinese President Xi Jinping held a meeting with his Spanish counterpart Pedro Sanchez during his third trip to China. During the visit, the Chinese president said he is willing to work with Spain to build a comprehensive strategic partnership with greater development vitality to improve the welfare of both peoples. President Sanchez also said that the two countries have always respected each other, cooperate in a friendly manner, and their relations have continued to deepen and develop. Russian President Vladimir Putin met with his U.S. Special Envoy Stephen Witkoff on Friday as they sat down for talks in St. Petersburg. The meeting lasted 4 hours and ended at around 22 p.m. local time when the delegations left the presidential library. According to the Kremlin, Putin and Witkoff discussed issues related to the settlement of the Ukrainian conflict after coming to power. U.S. President Donald Trump chose to accelerate contacts with Moscow. The restoration of relations between Russia and the U.S. began with a meeting of the delegations in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on February 18. Then, at the end of February, then again this week, negotiations were held in Istanbul, Turkey. The fourth edition of the Diplomacy Forum 2025 started in the city of Antalya in Turkey with the theme Recovering Diplomacy in a Fragmented World. The meeting is being attended by more than 20 head of states, 70 ministers and 60 representatives of international organizations who were welcomed by the President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The agenda foresees that in over than 50 sessions, world leaders and senior officials will address issues of global concern such as climate change, the fight against terrorism, human aid, digitalization, food security, among others. Moving on, the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East warns of worsening food crisis affecting more than 2 million Palestinians. The UN agency warns that a catastrophic situation is approaching for Palestinians due to the Israeli restrictions preventing the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Authorities add that available supplies will run out in days, threatening the life of Palestinians who will face an unprecedented famine. Israeli occupation forces have been dropping overnight shelling on the Gaza Strip as a result of 12 Palestinians lost their life, including 7 minors. The genocidal army airstruck a house in Khan Yunis city, southern Gaza, in which 10 family members did not survive such bombings. Israeli forces targeted northwestern Beit Lahiya city, so they hit to death 2 other Gazans. The United Nations denounced the occupation of at least 12 positions in the Syrian Golan by the Israeli regime in flagrant violation of the 1974 agreement to withdraw its troops. The UN reported that thousands of Israelis were stationed in Syrian territories or in the militarized zones which divide the Israeli-occupied area in the Syrian Golan Heights. In this sense, the multilateral organizations point out that Israeli violations do not end. They extended to the civilian population hindering agricultural work. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, officials and M23 negotiators arrived in Qatar for ceasefire talks. Members of the 2 delegations confirmed their presence and said that there was a direct meeting on Wednesday, but they are still discussing the framework of the talks. The push for peace talks in the latest efforts to end a world-long standoff with its roots in the 1994 Rwanda genocide. We have come to the end of this news brief. For teleSUR English and from the south of Marmarero, thank you for watching.